It was in the winter of 1957. My father walked into a little burger joint in Glens Ferry, Idaho. It was the place to be on a Saturday night. And he walked in and he sat down at a table with his friends. But as he had walked in, he had made eye contact with a lady there, a girl. My dad leaned over to his buddy and said, "Hey, do you know who that is?" And he says, "Yeah, her name's Eleanor Davis." And he goes, "So that's interesting that you ask, because she was just asking me a minute ago who you were." That's how my parents met in Glens Ferry, Idaho, in a winter Saturday night. This 2 years later, I would come along. But my parents came from two very, very different backgrounds. My mom had been raised Catholic. My mom was a longtime Boise resident. She was born here. We've been able to trace the Davis side, on my mom's side of the family, back to Boise, clear back into even the earliest settlers. In fact, on my mom's side of the family, they had the first lumber mill in Idaho. We were partially responsible for some of the logging that happened in the foothills. There'd be a lot more trees there today, but I remember when they did the centennial in 1890, the Statesman was running articles that had appeared 100 years before, but that same day. And they had interviewed those two great-uncles of mine and asked them how the season had gone. And they said, "You know, it was great, floating logs down the river. We only lost 9 guys this year." Things have changed, haven't they? Well, my mom was raised a good Catholic girl. She went to the precursor of Bishop Kelly. It was St. Teresa's. And I have 2 aunts that were nuns. In fact, one of those aunts left the nunnery to marry a priest. And of course, he left too. And so fortunately, I have 2 cousins that I'm very fond of as a result of that. But it's the whole Catholic side of the family. It was interesting. My grandfather died at the age of 99. He died at St. Al's in their cardio. He'd been there for, I think it was 8 months. And he loved being at St. Al's because he was able to have communion every single day. He was a spiritual guy. I know that he prayed for us often. We stayed with them quite often. I was raised in a very poor family, a family that worked very hard. My dad was one of the hardest working guys you'll ever meet. But I only remember probably 2 or 3 years even having health insurance or dental insurance. I remember one of the times when Dad had a job that had dental insurance, and we went in and the dentist came out to talk to my mom, and I heard him say, "Well, your son has 17 cavities. We can get those all taken care of today." I had no idea what that was. I was raised primarily in mobile home parks, apartment complexes. We moved somewhere between 20 to 25 times before I actually graduated from high school. So my dad's family is as interesting as my mom's. My great-grandfather, my namesake, because I'm Charles Frederick Cornforth IV, my namesake, he was at a parade in Salt Lake City, a Pioneer Day parade where the LDS faith community shares their migration from the Midwest to Utah in search of religious freedom. And he spotted somebody on a float. And he followed her. It was one of the earliest reported cases of stalking in the United States. But he followed that float all the way to the end and went up and introduced himself. And I guess she was quite taken with him, even though her bishop and his pastor, because he was a second-generation Seventh-day Adventist, both pastor and bishop said, no, this isn't a good idea. But they disagreed. They went ahead, got married, had 9 kids. And by the way, of those 9 kids, 5 were Adventists, 4 were LDS. Even in my own family, my brother Ed, I'm the oldest of 5 boys. And Ed is a Mormon bishop at a ward in Caldwell. And my brother Jeff, he is, I'm not sure what they call it, but he's Episcopalian, but he's on the board for the whole state of Iowa for the Episcopalian Church. My youngest brother, Sean, he believes in Ayn Rand, if you know who she is. And but he's struggling. He's got his own questions, but he's a smart guy. And we just met him last year for the first time. 2 years ago, I bought everybody in the family those Ancestry.com kits. And I had my reasons, but I was curious, and sure enough, everybody, and what they do is you don't do blood or anything. You spit into this tube, and then you seal it up, you put it in this prepackaged box, you send it off, they analyze it, and the remarkable things that are in saliva, it's incredible. They have this map that they send you that's part of your results, and they keep notifying me. I have something like 700 or 800 third, fourth, fifth, and sixth cousins. They go back that far. But in the midst of finding our brother Sean, we found they can actually go right down to even a little community outside of Oslo. They can show that one of my relatives from the past was from there. They can show you on the island of Ireland, right? The little neighborhoods in the little communities, they've been able to get it down to that kind of level. It's really remarkable. But what a mix my family has. It's a rich history. It's a rich history of Catholic, Adventist, and LDS. And you know what all three share in common? All three believe they're it. So family reunions have a heightened, and actually almost everybody in the family has agreed that family is more important than convincing the other family members that you're right. At least that's how it's gone so far. Have you ever noticed the older you get, the less filters you have? Yeah. So what a remarkable background in history that I've been blessed to have. My parents fought like crazy over religion, to the point where they both stopped going to their respective churches, and we were raised in a religiously neutral home. We were raised in such a way that religion just didn't come up. And I remember my senior year in high school, we had just won the state championship in football. And I was being recruited to play college football, mostly among Big Sky teams. In fact, I was recruited even by Boise State. And I remember going through the process of deciding, visiting each of the campuses, and it was fascinating. But I want to back up and I want to tell you something that had happened the year before. I was a junior, and I was attending our junior-senior banquet. That's where they listed out who the senior superlatives were. That's, who's got the best smile, who's the most likely to succeed and all that. But there was also another part of it, and that was about what the seniors were going to will to the juniors who were now going to become seniors in just a few weeks. So Scott Mills stood up, and he read this, because I have it memorized. I will to Fred Cornforth a tricky, quickie magic kit with methods on how to deflate the bloated ego. All the seniors laughed too. And they even applauded. And I'm sitting there thinking, whoa, that wasn't very cool, right? Apparently I still have a big head, because when Robbie Lane was trying to put this mic on my head, he said, you have a big head. So, but long before, or probably about the time that Pastor Troy was born, I went to my parents' bookshelf. My mom was an avid reader. She had read everything that Ayn Rand had ever written, Leon Uris. She read the tough stuff, Tolstoy. And I always loved just going and looking at the bookcase. But one day I noticed something. I had noticed it before, but there were two Bibles. This is in a divided home. There were two Bibles, a white Bible and a black Bible, this very black Bible. But there were two Bibles, my mom's Bible from her confirmation, from having been raised Catholic, and my dad's Adventist Bible, with the HMS Richards Senior helps in the back. I took out my mom's Bible, and I read through it, and I just kind of looked through it, and I didn't know what the Douay version of the Bible was, but there were lots of neat pictures in it and stuff. But in my adolescent years, a white Bible didn't seem to be the one that just attracted my attention, but my dad's did. Now, I never remember seeing either of those Bibles open in our home, ever. Never once, not once. We never prayed, we never had devotionals. It wasn't that. The only time we prayed was when the grandparents came over, and they usually were the ones that prayed. I went and I picked up this Bible, and I began to thumb through it. This is a King James Version, by the way, which I don't necessarily recommend in our modern era. I hope that's not offending anybody, but I somehow picked up this Bible, and I started reading a chapter a day before Pastor Troy was even born. This, for some reason, without any guidance, without church school, without any influences other than there was a ton of family, Mormons, Catholics, and Adventists praying for me, that one day that I decided to look past Ayn Rand and looked at the bookshelf, and there I saw those two Bibles. And I picked this Bible up, I took it back beside my bed, and I began to read it. And I would read, my goal was a chapter a day. Sometimes I was so tired because it was the last thing I did at the end of the day was I would go home, get in bed, after showering, climb in bed, and even if I was just exhausted, I would try to read this. I just remembered something I didn't mention this morning. I was visiting the campus at the University of Montana, and some of the players had taken me and a couple of other recruits out to drink, because in Montana you only had to be 18 then. And I was buzzed, and I remember coming back to the guest room where I was staying, and I'd brought this Bible, and through fuzzy eyes, I remember being still compelled to pick up this Bible and read it. And so I even read my chapter, even though I was inebriated. This, as I would read that Bible and get into it more and more, my mom one day said to me, "What's gotten into you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, you're different." And I said, "What do you mean I'm different?" She goes, "Well, you're kinder, and you're helping pick up around the house. You're helping with the dishes." And I tell you what, when you're the oldest of a bunch of boys, I mean, you almost see your mom as the housekeeper, the cook, that you don't see all the work that, and if I could do anything in my life to hit the rewind button, it would be to go back and love on my mom more. But what a remarkable woman she was, and the selflessness in which she raised us. But this, she mentioned this, and what was coming up too was the junior-senior banquet. I had the memories of the year before. But this time I'm a senior. I don't even remember what I willed or to who, but I remember when they read off the senior superlatives, my own class voted me the most talented and the easiest to talk to. In 1 year's time, reading this, I didn't know I was supposed to pray before I read it. I didn't go to church. Just reading this Bible, this very Bible, my life changed, and I was unaware. I didn't realize what was happening, but I was becoming a different person from the inside out. So much of us, we try to export from the outside into others, right? Well, that's not very successful, is it? You ever tried to have a conversation where you have a conviction about something and you're just struggling to get them to feel the same conviction about what you do? If they're polite, they may fake you out and pretend like they're excited about what you found, but generally speaking, all this has to happen from the inside out. And as I was reading this Bible, my life slowly began to change, and I developed a conviction about the Sabbath. And I remember calling up the coach of the team that I had signed a national letter of intent to play with. I remember calling him and telling him that I was going to Walla Walla College because I couldn't play college football because it's on Friday and Saturdays, the games usually. And he said, I understand, Fred, but you give this Christianity thing a try for a year, and if it doesn't work out, you come back and I'll give you your scholarship. That's what he said to me. But I went on to Walla Walla, and I was baptized there. It was soon that I heard for the first time a young preacher by the name of Dwight Nelson. He was only 25 or 26 at the time. I heard him speak, and I said to myself, I've got to be a pastor. I love what I'm seeing. I love what I'm hearing. I want to do that too. I want to share my story. I want to share my perspective. And there would be another event that would happen about this same time. It was 2 years later. I was in Pocatello. I had transferred to Idaho State University, and I was getting a business degree with an emphasis in healthcare administration, and they have a good program there. And I'd gone on a walk. It was late at night, and there was this park. It was just one of those perfect evenings, but they had the adult swing sets, the real high ones with the real thick chains and the big seats, and I just sat in that, and I swang back and forth, just not killing myself, but just swinging back and forth. 21 years of age, and it was at that time that I realized that I had two callings in my life. I had a calling to be a pastor or minister, but I also knew I had a calling to be a businessman. I knew then that my career goal was going to be, I wanted to own 200 nursing homes, and from those nursing homes, I wanted to open up free medical and dental clinics. 21 years old, I'm poor as a church mouse. In fact, a church mouse at least lives in a church that has no mortgage that it pays for. I had student loans. I knew then in my heart that I wanted to help other people, but I also wanted to be a businessman too. And it was interesting. People measure success in different ways. But somebody recently said to me, I think I know why you do the good things you do. It's because you feel guilty about your wealth. They don't know me very well. I was 17 years old, just months before I picked up this Bible. I had worked for a construction company in the area, and I'd saved up money. It was one of those times where we didn't have dental insurance. And I was very aware of my appearance because I was noticing girls. What a wonderful thing. As they say in the LDS church, admire all the flowers of the field, but only pick one. My oasis, my wife, I'm a fortunate man. I had a cavity developing right between this tooth and this front tooth. And it was it was gray, you could see it, and I was very self-conscious of it. And I took $80, which was the equivalent of 2 or 3 days' work. And I went in and I actually paid. It was one of my proudest moments because I was independent. But I went and I paid that $80 to have that tooth fixed. All of that influenced me. I remember my mom wanting to take us to the doctor when we were growing up, but couldn't. My mom was working, this was when I was younger. My mom was working at, used to be called Norse Chuckwagon. It's a cheap old buffet place around here. I think they still may be around. But she was in charge of doing salads. Now here's a woman who had turned down an academic scholarship to the University of Idaho to marry my dad. My dad, a construction worker, had quit school at 16, and they had separated and then remarried 2 years later. But during that time, my mom was a single mom. My dad had moved to California. We were here in Boise. And last night I drove over by Roosevelt Elementary School, which is one of the schools. I've gone to, I think, 5 or 6 of the elementary schools here in Boise. And as part of that moving 20 to 25 times that I experienced. But right across the street from Roosevelt Elementary School is the Roosevelt Market. It's been in the Statesman a couple times because it's just the quaintest little thing. But I had noticed my mom's purse on the counter, the kitchen counter, and I saw two $1 bills. And I took those two $1 bills and I headed to that market. And with $1, I bought 20 Reese's peanut butter cups because they were only 5 cents back then. I remember the crinkling of the bag as the cashier handed me this bag full of 20 Reese's peanut butter cups. I was the happiest third or fourth grader on the planet. And I headed to the school. It was in the evening. I headed to the school, and there was a fire escape on the outside. And I went and sat up at the very top of that. I was like 2 or 3 stories up. And as I would eat the Reese's peanut butter cups, I'd take that little wax paper cup, and I would just drop them out, and they'd float down. And I ate all 20 of them. Sweet in the mouth, bitter in the stomach. I think that's scriptural. But I Googled a couple of days ago what the minimum wage was back in 1968. It was $1.60 an hour. That was before taxes. A loaf of bread cost 22 cents. And I got thinking, not just a few days ago, but this is one of those guilt things that I've carried with me my whole life. There's nothing I can do about it. It was a consequence. My mom never said anything to me about it. I never remember being hungry or wanting for anything. But I could just picture my mom going to her purse, looking for those $2 because she knew she needed to feed all these boys and not finding it. You know, we were never meant to carry guilt. We were never meant to experience many of the things that we face as individuals. We were never meant to experience death. We were never meant to watch our loved ones just slip away. Now, we were not designed for that. After 12 years of being in the pulpit, I began to hit some serious questions. I saw people dying around me. I saw 47 people that I knew in a 2-year period pass away. I lost both grandfathers. I lost a brother. I lost 2 aunts. I lost 4 or 5 people that I worked with. I had 2 people die in my offices because we have a number of staff. I haven't had anybody die in my office in the 25 years except for those 2 in that very brief period of time. Death was around me. I, in fact, wanted to get a tattoo of the Grim Reaper on my shoulder because by the time I had left the pulpit, I was in a full-blown agnostic stage. I didn't care if God existed. I stopped reading my Bible. I had, for 10 or 12 years, I had never opened up my Bible at all. I stopped praying. What I did was, my defense was, I had questions that nobody could answer. Why does God allow orphans? Why does God allow death? Why does a mom have to sit there and look and watch her child pass away? Those are questions that agnostics love to ask. It also keeps God and it keeps other believers away because who wants to be around a skunk that's asking questions like that, right? So during this time I divorced my kid's mom. I remember the night that she took our 2 kids and went down to a restaurant while I went into the house, and I walked into the walk-in closet and I took out all my clothes. And as I walked out of that walk-in closet right by their rooms, I fell to the floor. There was nobody there to confirm that this happened. There was nobody there to see what was probably the most emotional thing that I'd ever felt. Nobody was there to see that I was beginning to realize that by leaving, I was only going to get to see my kids half time from that point on. I was making a decision. I couldn't stay, but the devastation of what was happening inside of me and what I knew I was going to be doing to my kids, the consequences of that decision, today there's nothing I can do about it. I've asked for their forgiveness. I've asked for their forgiveness so many times that they've asked me to stop asking because they said, is there something wrong with this? Do you think you messed us up? Is there a reason why you keep asking us to forgive you? Through all this, I found drinking. And drinking was one of the few ways that I found that was able to numb myself to these questions. Probably more importantly, it was numbing myself to the answers. And so as I was wrestling with this internally, and I didn't know who to turn to because I didn't trust anybody. I really didn't care about anybody. I was in such survival mode. It was all about me. That's all I could be. What do I do with all this guilt? I met a man, his name is Kimbleton Wiggins. He's from Keene, Texas. And I took my agnostic questions that I had refined over the years, and I pelted him with them. And he said, that's interesting. Oh, really? And he said, well, I hadn't thought of it that way. He didn't challenge me or question me. By the way, he's from a Caribbean island. He's about 5'7", black as the night, white teeth. He's Bayesian. He came up in the English or the British educational system, so he spoke English with a British accent. And he began to ask me questions. He said, so when you see these things that aren't right in the world, what are you doing about them? No, I'm not here to do anything about it. I'm only here to point these things out, Wiggins, to show why I don't believe in God. He goes, well, have you thought about why you're seeing those things? And what I didn't realize was that my questions were in the process of becoming a conversation with God and with Kimbleton Wiggins. That those conversations would evolve into prayer. And then Wiggins hit me with this insight. He said, you're starting to see the world the way God sees it. And he goes, you see these orphans? You see these things that are wrong in the world? You see the injustice, the hate? Wiggins asked me, what are you going to do about it? And then I remembered the Amy Grant song, My Father's Eyes. And it dawned on me that all the time God was trying to tell me, yes, Fred, I agree. I see these same things. What are you going to do about it? The problem was I had my own stuff. I didn't really have anything to give. I had only kept one text out of this entire Bible. In fact, it wasn't even a full text. It was James 1:27, and it was only half of that text. Here is pure and undefiled religion, that you care for widows and orphans in their affliction. In my agnosticism, that was I didn't even have a full verse that I kept with me. I only had a half of one. But it still influenced my behavior. And somehow, through 10 to 12 years of just complete shutting out the scriptures and this arm wrestling match with God, by the way, don't ever try that because you'll never win. But I began to turn, and I describe this is I had gone into the wilderness of agnosticism, but when I went to turn out to come back out, I had found out that God had followed me in, and he was right there beside me. And I found, see if this is your experience, but I found that it was easier to accept God's forgiveness than to forgive myself. Because all these decisions that I had made the consequences were still around me. I won't go into the details of it because it's private to family members of mine, but there's a drinking problem within my family as a result of what I did. I found out another family member of mine who passed away recently had an opiate addiction. These things I had no idea, but there's nothing you can do. There's no rewind button. You can't go back and edit something out. It's there. It showed up in a text this morning. Our consequences of our behavior, and forgiving yourself, is something that happens from the inside out. This song that Caleb and his band performed for us about the resurrection, I had never thought of this. By the way, could you show that picture? Do you still have that handy? This is the third time I've given this sermon this Sabbath. Last night was the first time. You can see my congregation of two, our two dogs. But listening to the song this morning, it really dawned on me, thanks through the help of the praise band, that the resurrection has already started. It's already started inside us. And that new creation, that new being, it's already begun. And it starts from the inside out. It's something you can't smother barbecue sauce or lotion on somebody. It just literally has to happen from the inside out. And it happens by reading your Bible one chapter a day, at least. So, after being single 8 years, and when I asked Dr. Wiggins to be rebaptized, he said, let me think about it. And I went to his office there in Keene. He actually lives in Cleburne. It's just right there on the border of Keene. This isn't a big metropolitan area, by the way. This is very rural. I'm there in his living room, and he said to me, he said, you know what? You know the story about Peter? When Jesus washed his feet, and Peter said to him, please wash all of me? Wiggins said that was a way in which Peter was asking to be rebaptized. He wanted to be entirely washed. And I watched Dr. Kimbleton Wiggins, a man who I'd come to love and appreciate very much. I watched him kneel in front of me, and he washed my feet. And they call it the service of humility. Sorry, I didn't expect this emotional response. I was telling Joe Verska, I hate getting old because my filters of being able to swallow the tears is evaporating. I can't even watch a McDonald's commercial on TV that's got a family going to have hamburgers, and I just start crying. So God's grace is sufficient. I don't have any right to stand up here. My dogs and my wife can testify to you that I am a flawed, imperfect human being. But for the strangest reason, when God looks at us, he sees perfection. And I think in a gentle way, like my kids asked me to stop asking for forgiveness, I hope that somehow my testimony today has helped one or two of you that in your heart of hearts, if you haven't been able to forgive yourself, that maybe turn out and realize that when we are healed from the inside out, it's because we're called to serve others from the inside out, not from a checklist, well, I better do this week, or I better do this today. What a remarkable thing. There is a book that makes reference to what the generation will be like just before the second coming. Now, I'm a fifth generation Seventh-day Adventist. And have you seen the cartoon that shows a man looking at his prophetic chart, and he looks up and it shows 3 angels flying by, and then he looks back at his chart, and he looks back up at them and says, hey, you guys are early. This, I'm afraid, for us, that we have been so inward focused. It's so busy in preparation for ourselves for meeting the Lord that the whole of Matthew 25 has been missed about serving others as a lifestyle, not just a box checked or a half hour here or something, even though all those things can be great. God heals us from the inside out. He heals us in a way that we can ask questions. We have doubt. I know that. I still have agnostic questions in my head, but I have hope. And I want to read this psalm again to you in conclusion. As for me, I will always have hope. I will praise you more and more. My mouth will tell of your righteous deeds in my life, of your saving acts all day long, though I know not how to relate them all. I don't know how to tell you everything I've experienced. There's so much I left out. I will come and proclaim your mighty acts, sovereign Lord. I will proclaim your righteous deeds, yours alone, not mine, yours alone. Since my youth, a tale of two Bibles, since my youth, God, you have taught me, and to this day I declare your marvelous deeds. Even when I am old and gray, do not forsake me, my God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your mighty acts to all who are to come. Healed from the inside out, forgiven, even though we can't control the consequences. Read your Bibles, and then go serve.
We're actually going to sing that song again, Resurrecting, and hopefully by listening to it, you can then join in with us. Just because it is fitting, God is constantly in the process of resurrecting us up into that day when we are truly resurrected and he comes back again. That once was crowned with thorns is crowned with glory now. The Savior knelt to wash our feet. Now at his feet we bow.
The one who now robed in majesty, the radiance of perfect love now shines for all to see.
Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Fear that held us now gives way to him who is our peace.
His final breath upon the cross
by your Spirit.
By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King, He's resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The resurrected King is resurrecting me.
The tomb where soldiers watched in vain was borrowed for 3 days. His body there would not remain. Our God has robbed the grave. Our God has robbed the grave. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. And all praise will rise to Christ our King. By your Spirit. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The resurrected King is resurrecting me.
As we leave, hopefully some of these words we can take with us that have been spoken today, and hopefully, prayerfully, we will remember that your forgiveness is much greater than our own inability to forgive ourselves. And for that, we are eternally thankful. Thank you for changing us, for resurrecting us from the inside out. Amen.